All right, let's get into it. We're about to pull back the curtain on the so-called magic that makes the websites you use every day feel alive. In this explainer, we're going to break down how a simple click can completely change a web page by looking at the fundamental building blocks of JavaScript. You know the feeling, right? You've done it a million times. You click a button, maybe to like a photo or add something to your cart, and instantly something on the screen changes. But have you ever stopped to think about what's happening in that split second? How does the website know what to do? So for our little project here, we're going to focus on one super simple interaction. We've got some text and we've got a button. You click the button and bam, the text changes and so does the color. This is the magic trick we're going to figure out how to do, step by step. Okay, so how do we get from a physical click of your mouse to a digital change on the screen? To really understand that trick, we need to first look at how JavaScript can even talk to a web page at all. It really just boils down to two things. First, your code needs a way to find elements on the page and then change them. That's the talking part. And second, it needs a way to know when you've actually done something, like clicking. That's the listening part. All right, so let's talk about the actual tools JavaScript uses for this. They're called the DOM and events. And I'm not exaggerating when I say they are the absolute foundation of pretty much all interactivity on the web. You might think of a web page as just a static document, but the browser? It sees something totally different. It sees a live, structured map called the DOM. Every single thing on that page, every heading, every button is like a landmark on that map that JavaScript can go find and mess with. So how does this conversation actually happen? Well, it's this really simple two-step dance. First, you tell JavaScript what you're looking for on the map, using a command like document.querySelector. Then, once it's got it, you tell it what to do. Change the text, update the style, whatever. Find it, then change it. That's the core pattern right there. Okay, so that's the talking part. But what about the listening? How does it know when to talk? Well, it listens for what we call events. An event is just a signal that something happened, and there's a signal for just about everything you can do, from a simple click to typing in a form. And for our magic trick, that click event is exactly what we need. Okay, so we know how to listen for a click. But then what? When that click actually happens, what instructions are we going to give the program? We need a way to package up those instructions so we can use them again and again. And that's where functions come into the picture. Seriously? Just think of a function like a recipe. You write down the steps for changing our text one time, you give that recipe a name, and then whenever that button gets clicked, you just tell JavaScript, hey, go run that recipe now. And you can see right here how much JavaScript has changed over the years. On the left, you've got the classic way of writing a function, and on the right, the modern arrow function. See how much cleaner and shorter that is? That's pretty much the standard now for a lot of things, especially for these event listeners we're using. But, simple instructions only get you so far. For anything really cool, your code needs to have a brain. It needs to be able to look at a situation and make a choice. And this decision-making superpower is called control flow. And the two big tools for this are if-else and switch. An if-else statement is like a simple fork in the road. If this one thing is true, go this way. Otherwise, go that way. A switch statement? That's more like a big roundabout with a bunch of exits, which is perfect when you need to check one single thing against a whole list of possibilities. Okay, so we've got our instructions and we've got a brain to make decisions. But what are they making decisions about? Our code needs information to actually work with, and we got to store that information somewhere, right? And that is exactly what variables are for. This is like programming 101, but it's so important. Just picture labeled boxes. You take some piece of info, a username, a number, even a link to that button on our page, you put it in a box, and you stick a label on it. That way you can find it and use it whenever you need it later. Now, in modern JavaScript, you basically have two main kinds of boxes, let and const. And the rule of thumb is actually super simple. Use let if you know for a fact that the thing inside the box is going to change. For literally everything else, use const. It's a signal to you and other developers that this label is always going to point to the same thing, and that makes your code way safer. And hey, here's a little pro tip for you. Everyone, and I mean everyone, trips over these when they're starting out. Trying to change a const variable after you've set it, it's like a rite of passage. So just keeping these common mistakes in the back of your mind is going to save you so much time and so many headaches later on. All right, This is it. We've collected all the pieces of our puzzle. We know how to find things with the DOM, how to listen for a click, how to store info in variables, and how to write our instructions with functions. It's time to put it all together and finally deconstruct that magic trick.
Okay, here it is, the full picture. On the left, you've got our super simple HTML, just a heading and a button. And on the right, the JavaScript that makes it all happen. Now I know it might look like a lot at first glance, but trust me, we have all the tools we need to understand every single line. Let's walk through it.
Okay, step 1. The very first thing we do is reach into the DOM and grab the two elements we care about, the title and the button. Then we put them in those labeled boxes, our const variables. Simple, right? Now our script knows exactly what elements we're talking about.
Next up, remember how we said JavaScript listens? Well, this is what that looks like in the real world. We take our button variable and we attach what's called an add event listener. We're literally telling it, hey, button, I need you to listen for one thing and one thing only, a click. And finally, what happens when it hears that click? It runs our recipe, the arrow function. And the instructions inside? It's that classic DOM manipulation we talked about. We go to our title and say, okay, change your text to text updated. And while you're at it, change your style color to red. And that's the whole trick. So there you have it. What looked like some kind of instant magic is really just a super clear, logical sequence of events. The listener hears an action that triggers a function, and that function gives instructions to the DOM on what to change. It's really just a conversation between all these pieces.
We've pulled back the curtain, we've demystified the magic, and what you've just learned are the absolute fundamental building blocks that power almost every interactive thing you see on the web. They're like the Lego bricks of the internet. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build first?